2026 is right around the corner, and every division in the UFC has matchups that aren't just exciting but absolutely necessary. Today we're going to be breaking down fights that must happen in each division and explain why it's important that they happen. So let's get into it. Starting with the flyweight division, you have Tyra and Joshua Van. Now this fight must happen because it's the future of the flyweight division. You have two young, fast, very technical fighters with completely different styles. You've got Tyra with the grappling heavy style, and you've got Joshua Van with the striking heavy style. This fight will allow us to see whether Joshua Van can defend himself from grappling heavy styles, or whether Tyra can take over the championship and become the first Japanese fighter to become a champion in the UFC. This fight can establish, the strong presence of a new generation in that division and establish young fighters who will be able to compete for a very long time, deliver strong, entertaining fights, and have a big impact in the long term in their careers in the UFC. The next fight to make is Petr Yan and Umar Nurmagomedov in the Bantamweight division, and this is because you've had a lot of fights between Merab Dvalishvili and Petr Yan. You've had a fight between Sean O'Malley and Petr Yan. You've had a fight between Merab and Umar Nurmagomedov. So you could make a new fight between Umar and Petr Yan. You have two well-rounded guys. Umar being predominantly a Dagestani wrestler, someone with great wrestling and ability to keep you down, but not too bad on the feet and has decent striking. And then you have Petr Yan, who's just an all-round great fighter and one of the greatest fighters of all time. He is someone that has great wrestling, great striking fundamentals, and just the ability to just adapt and be an all-rounder when it comes to fighting. That fight can be something new in the division, and it can pull the division to somewhere new in a new direction. Having these two fight instead of having rematches for Yan, it could create future scenarios which can be more entertaining and have a different impact for that division in the UFC. Third fight to make is in the featherweight division, and it's between Movsar Evloev and Lerone Murphy. This fight should happen because the fight with Movsar and Volkanovski, or the fight with Volkanovski and Lerone, hasn't happened. It's been booked for Diego Lopez and Volkanovski to have a rematch. So I say in the meantime, I'd say you make a fight between Movsar and Lerone Murphy, and by doing this fight, you'll have two very high skilled fighters who are doing great in the featherweight division, have them battle it out, and whoever wins become the contender for the title fight between the victor of Diego Lopez and Alexander Volkanovski. By doing this, it allows one of these two guys to have a correct claim to fight Alexander Volkanovski, and it will allow us to see a high level performance from either one of these two guys to have against each other. Lerone being a very talented technical striker and Movsar being a very talented wrestler. So we could see which style can take over the other and allow us to see a rightful contender to be fighting for the belt against the champion of either Diego and Volkanovski, which can allow us to have an entertaining title fight in the future in 2026. The next fight that I'm pushing for to happen in 2026 is in the lightweight division, specifically between Ilia Topuria and Arman Tsarukyan. Now the chances of this happening is very unlikely, but with this situation of Paddy Pimblett and Justin Gaethje, them fighting soon in the future, and whoever wins that fight getting the title shot against Ilia Topuria, I do see Ilia Topuria beating either of those guys, as he's a lot more talented all round, better than them when it comes to striking and wrestling and grappling. But someone that I would like to see fight Ilia is someone like Arman Tsarukyan. Even though I see Ilia being Arman Tsarukyan, I do see Arman performing better than both Paddy Pimblett and Justin Gaethje. He has a great level of wrestling. In his UFC debut, even though it was a while ago, and he was literally on his debut at a young age, he fought Islam Makhachev and did pretty decent and not bad. Even though he lost, he put up a great performance. So we haven't seen Ilia Topuria fight heavy wrestler styles. He's been predominantly fighting strikers. The one time he did fight somewhat of a wrestler was Bryce Mitchell, and even Bryce Mitchell got him down. So it would be, I know that was a while ago and Ilya has, constantly evolved since then, but it would be interesting to see someone with a high pedigree of wrestling fight someone like Ilya Topuria and see how Ilya performs and whether they can beat him. So that's the next fight I'd say should happen in 2026. The next matchup on this list is in the welterweight division, and it's between Shavkat Rakhmonov and Islam Makhachev. Although Shavkat hasn't fought in a long while, we still have to remember he is someone that is really, decent in the welterweight division. He has great striking and doesn't have, really bad wrestling. Although this is a terrible example, wrestling Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who has no wrestling at all, and submitting him. That's not, high level wrestling like Islam Makhachev's, but it's something. We've seen some sort of wrestling from Shavkat Rakhmonov. He's able to get some sort of submissions like he did against Jeff Neal. So we can see that he has some sort of wrestling, and he is a lot bigger than Islam Makhachev. Shavkat stands at 6'1". Islam Makhachev's about 5'10", 5'11". So it would be interesting to see whether Islam does well against bigger, taller guys, since a lot of his career he's fought guys who are either smaller or at the same height or just a tiny bit taller than him, versus JDM for example. So it would be quite interesting to see how Islam fights bigger guys and whether that sort of wrestling that he normally does and that normal style of striking that he does is able to impact people like Shavkat Rakhmonov, and whether Shavkat Rakhmonov can deal with the heavy Dagestani wrestling style and be able to impose his type of striking and his his sort of grappling, for example. That type of matchup is interesting and unique, and I'd love to see that in 2026. Next on the list is Khamzat Chimaev and Anthony Hernandez. Now I'm going with this one because in the middleweight division there's not a lot of wrestlers other than Khamzat Chimaev, and the only person who's shown wrestling ability to a decent level, nothing like Khamzat Chimaev, is Anthony Hernandez. He also has pretty decent striking. I see that in the middleweight division. There's not a lot of people that can take out the likes of Khamzat Chimaev. We all know what Khamzat Chimaev's game plan is, and we all thought that there was one, kryptonite against Khamzat Chimaev, which was his cardio. But since the DDP fight, we can see that he is able to go through long rounds and go to the whole 5 rounds this time, and still able to implement his very dominant Chechen grappling. That style of grappling that we all know what is going to happen, but no one can seem to defend it. So it would be interesting to see how Anthony Hernandez implements his style of wrestling, or whether he can defend it, and whether he can implement his own style of attack on Khamzat Chimaev. It'd be an interesting fight because there's not a lot of interesting matchups for Khamzat Chimaev in the middleweight division, as a lot of the guys I don't see him beating Khamzat Chimaev. I don't see Sean Strickland or Nasruddin Imamov or DDP again beating Khamzat Chimaev. So I see I say we get someone like Fluffy Hernandez to try have a go and see whether that can work well against Khamzat Chimaev. So that's the next person on the list. Now going into the light heavyweight division, I've gone for something different, and that's between Yuri Prochazka and Magomed Ankalaev. And hear me out on this. I've gone with this fight because predominantly both of these guys are strikers. Yes, Magomed can wrestle, but that's not his his bread and butter. It's not his go-to. He only uses that when he's facing dangerous levels of strikers, or when he's just facing Alex Pereira. But when you compare their styles of striking, it's the total opposite. Yuri is someone that just goes for violence. Is very unorthodox and just goes for it. Whereas Magomed tries to stay calm at all times, picking his shots, is trying to stay very disciplined. Whereas Yuri is just someone who's unpredictable. We can see a high level of violence in this fight. We can see whether calculated, well-timed striking can prevail over very unorthodox, unpredictable styles of striking, or whether Ankalaev can get a win and get himself back up in the rankings and be in the talks for another title fight, or whether Yuri can push himself forward, defeat Ankalaev, and somehow get another rematch with Alex Pereira. So that fight could be interesting, and it could determine the steps forward for that division, because Alex Pereira has beaten everyone in the division. there's not many opponents for him to face in that division. So it would be interesting to see whether one of these guys can pull something interesting, pull off a very dominant performance, and determine the future of that division, whether it can get Alex Pereira to fight him. Now finally, in the heavyweight division, originally I was thinking for Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane again for a rematch. I don't doubt that's not going to happen in 2026. A rematch, there's now a storyline behind it. Tom trying to get redemption and Cyril trying to prove something against people. So I can see that happening, but something that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, and it's a fight between Alex Pereira and Cyril Gane. Now hear me out on this one. Both fighters are very talented kickboxers and strikers. They are so intelligent when it comes to striking, picking their shots, they truly understand the aspect of striking, and it's a real beauty to watch both these types of fighters strike. Alex, has a lot of heavy power behind his shots, is able to KO people and just destroy people. Whereas you got Cyril Gane, he won't predominantly knock everyone out, but he has that very pretty style of just hitting people, getting away. He almost just moves like a welterweight at heavyweight, which is pretty interesting to see. We'll be able to see a very high level striking matchup between these two guys. When it comes to entertainment value, it's there. You can see two great fighters go at it in their respective disciplines and put on a great entertaining performance while they're at it. So that's why I'd say that fight should happen in the heavyweight division. Alex Pereira can make a debut at heavyweight and pull it on a great performance if he wins, and Cyril Gane can show us to people like Alex Pereira that there's levels in this division and whether he should really consider going up to heavyweight. So that's for thought. That fight should happen in the future in 2026, as there's a lot of interesting outcomes that can arise from it. But anyways, that's just my opinion. These are the fights I personally just want to see in 2026, as I think that these are the fights that are worth happening. But let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Let me know what are the fights you want to see happen in 2026. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.